Kids keep coming out here all the time, playing pranks on me, breaking my roses, stealing stuff from my garden.
He's been shot.
Now we are an organization.
My name is Anneliese Dickman, and I'm the Communications Director for the Wisconsin Anti-Violence Effort Educational Fund, or WAVE. And we are a statewide grassroots advocacy organization that works to improve the state's gun laws by making them stronger so that we can prevent easy access to firearms, because we know that it's the easy access that has the biggest impact on gun deaths in the state. Most gun deaths in Wisconsin are suicide deaths, and we know that there are ways that we can prevent those deaths. And most children who die from guns in Wisconsin are killed by homicide or unintentional shootings, and we can prevent those types of gun deaths as well.
Do you have any statistics on, I don't know about off the top of your head, but any statistics on the amount of types of gun deaths, in regards to a suicide or homicide or anything like that?
Yeah, so annually in Wisconsin there are over 600 deaths from firearms each year, and almost 3/4 of those are suicides. And the population most at risk for dying from suicide in Wisconsin are white men, middle age and older.
Why would that be?
Well, that's who most of the gun owners are. So owning a gun puts you at a higher risk for suicide.
Okay. And the age range, you're thinking, for most of the deaths?
Oh, most of the suicide deaths
Yeah.
are among white men age 50 and over.
50 and over.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference that you've been aware of between the federal laws regarding these and the state laws? Is there much of a difference? Is it pretty much the same, or is there a big disparity between the two?
Well, there isn't a lot by way of federal law. This has been mostly left to the states to regulate. There's a federal law that requires that any gun dealers who have a license, a federal license to sell guns, have to issue a background check, conduct a background check with every gun sale. And it's up to the states to decide whether any other types of gun laws also require background checks. And there are many states who do require that, but Wisconsin's not one of them. So in Wisconsin, if you buy a firearm from anyone who's not a federally licensed gun dealer, there's no requirement that you have a background check. And that's the loophole that we would most like to close, because we know that that loophole is responsible for many gun deaths in this state.
How would you rate, first of all, how would you rate the federal level, A, B, C, D, just like a school report, and how would you rate the state, A, B, C, D, F,
Right, well, I guess I wouldn't do that probably, but the federal law has a lot of loopholes, because it only applies to those licensed gun dealers. So there are quite a few ways to buy or purchase guns that don't include going to a federally licensed gun dealer. So that leaves open a huge loophole. In addition, the database where they conduct the background checks has weaknesses. So even the background checks we conduct may not be capturing all the information that we would like to capture to make sure those most at risk of being dangerous are prevented from owning a firearm. So the federal law can be strengthened for sure, and then Wisconsin's laws are way behind most states, including many of our neighbor states. So Wisconsin's laws need a lot of improvement if we're going to make a dent in the amount of gun deaths in this state.
Well, that was going to be my next question. We border Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois. Mm-hmm. How do those states compare to Wisconsin, and is there a lot of that kind of gun traffic over the borders?
Most of the traffic is guns leaving Wisconsin and going to those other states. They all have stronger laws than we do here in Wisconsin. And Illinois releases data on where the guns seized after crimes in that state, where they were originally sold. And most of those guns in Illinois came from out of state. So most crime guns in Illinois came from out of state. Most from Indiana, and then the rest from Wisconsin. So our weak laws here in Wisconsin are resulting in crimes in Illinois.
Are the guns that come into Wisconsin in the first place, before they're sold either to Wisconsinites or people outside, where do they come from? You know, I mean, gun manufacturers obviously, but where do they come from? Where's the main sort of bloodline come from?
Well, most guns are sold legally initially. Yeah. So Cabela, you know, the big gun dealers, big brick and mortar stores are where most guns are sold. Do
you have a lot of small private?
There are thousands of small gun dealers in Wisconsin, thousands and thousands. But most of them are not buying their guns directly from manufacturers.
Oh, I see.
So, I mean, they can, obviously they can, but there's, you know, they're small, so they're not making big purchases. Probably. I mean, this isn't numbers that I've looked at closely.
Have you been, has WAVE been working or dealing with either the sporting goods stores like Cabela's that may sell things, the middleman in other words, or have you been working more with the gun manufacturers themselves as far as
That's not what we do. We work on policy.
You work on...
So we advocate at the local and state level for stronger policies to prevent access to guns.
Do you know of folks that petition or in any way influence the gun manufacturers or the retailers or anything like that?
I mean, that hasn't been tried in decades. There isn't there was efforts to do that, like during the Clinton administration, and the gun lobby basically eats its own. So any gun manufacturer that makes any move to try to strengthen practices around gun sales, they turn on that. So we've seen that happen. Most recently, Dick's Sporting Goods decided they were no longer going to sell assault weapons, and we've seen the NRA turn on them. Many of their vendors turn on them. So it's not people who are trying to prevent gun deaths aren't trying to do so by talking to gun manufacturers or gun dealers usually.
Has that helped in the past at all?
No.
No. Do you think it would?
I mean, I was thrilled to see that Dick's wasn't going to sell those types of weapons anymore, and many other dealers decided that they were not going to sell to people under age 21 anymore after the Parkland shooting in Florida. And I do think that will, make a small difference. But what we know for a fact will make a difference is having stronger gun laws.
Has there been any kind of push towards new technology? Because I know you can put your thumbprint on your cell phone and you can open up a bank account that way, things like that. You could probably do something like that on a gun so that only the owner of a gun is the only one who can shoot it. Right. Stuff like that. And I know somebody's been developing stuff like that.
That has not, the manufacturers are not willing to put those kind of guns to market. Definitely those guns have been developed and they are not in the marketplace because the manufacturers will not put them in the marketplace. In addition, we have millions of guns already in people's homes all across this country. So a new gun to market is only going to add to the number of guns out there, and more guns equals more deaths. Mm-hmm. So we're not pushing for any sort of new product to be brought to market. We already have too many guns out there.
Well, the thing is, the technology can be retrofitted. That's what I'm saying, you know. So that the guns that are...
I'm not aware that there's a retrofit that would work.
Well, it could be developed. That's, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's possible to get a movie on your cell phone, it's possible to
Right.
do that.
But we know from the many other states who have better laws than what we have in Wisconsin and have fewer deaths, that the practical way to go about this is to pass stronger laws. That's simpler, faster, more cost-effective, and actually does prevent death.
How much of a percentage, or how much do you see as far as kids getting a hold of guns?
It's a huge problem. You cannot own a handgun in Wisconsin unless you're 21, and yet we have children arrested for crimes with guns who are younger than that. We have children who die because they've gotten a hold of guns who are younger than that. So it's a big problem. Adults have to ensure that children do not have access to firearms.
Now, in this state, we just passed a measure that kids can go hunting with their dads at younger than high school age.
There is no longer a minimum hunting age in Wisconsin.
Yeah, but they have to be accompanied by an adult or something like that. But
there's no longer a minimum hunting age in Wisconsin.
Yeah. How long has that been in force?
That passed this year.
That passed this year. So you don't have any statistics on any kind of...
Yes. The hunting licenses that were issued this year included 10 infants under the age of 1.
Okay. So any guesses as to how much that might influence things for better or worse? Or
I don't think it's, for the most part, we're not worried about hunters.
Yeah.
So I think it sends a wrong message to children and to their parents to say very, very young children have the developmental ability to understand the risks that are associated with handling a firearm. That's clearly not the case. Children that young, we don't give them chainsaws, we don't give them the keys to our car. I mean, there are many dangerous things that we do not allow young children to get their hands on, and I don't think guns should be any different than that. And so we are sending a misleading message to parents by eliminating that hunting age, but for the most part, we're not worried about hunting regulations impacting violent crime. Of course, having guns in the home of any type increases your risk of someone in the home being injured by a firearm or death.
I got 2 follow-up questions on there. One is the difference between urban and rural. Most gun problems seem to be urban problems, and most rural situations seem to be just the hunters. Is that just a myth?
No,
or
that's a myth. That's a myth. So like I said before, most gun deaths in Wisconsin are suicides. Those occur in every single community. But your risk of suicide increases if you own firearms. And most firearms are owned by older white males. And so this notion that gun violence is only an urban problem is really not true. A big component of gun violence in Wisconsin is actually domestic violence, and that occurs in every community as well. Now, violent crimes differ around the state by community, but when we say we want to prevent gun deaths, if we can prevent suicide deaths in rural areas, we will make a big dent in the total number of deaths in this state.
What about gun buyback programs? One of the things I've heard from police is that when they have a gun buyback program, what they tend to get is grandpa's old rusty shotguns and stuff like that. And what they really need are the AR-15s and
right, yeah. We haven't seen, there hasn't been any research that's shown that gun buyback programs actually reduce crime. They are helpful to people who no longer wish to own a firearm but don't have a safe way to get rid of it. But it doesn't do much to reduce crime.
I think we could wrap this up. Is there anything that you want to add to any of the stuff that we've
I mean, what we know works to prevent gun deaths is having a background check on every single gun sale, having a waiting period for handgun sales. Wisconsin, for many, many years, had a 48-hour waiting period for handgun sales, and a few years ago that was eliminated. But we know that that reduces both homicides and suicides. We know that the biggest predictor of future violence is past violence, and that's why we prohibit felons from possessing firearms. That's a federal law. States can go further than that, and some states do. We'd love to see Wisconsin prohibit people who've had multiple convictions for violent misdemeanors from possessing a firearm. And we would also like to see a bill passed here that would allow family members to get a restraining order when a loved one has made a threat that they are going to either harm themselves or harm someone else with a firearm. And that would allow law enforcement to remove the firearm temporarily until the risk has passed. So there are other states that have that kind of law. In Wisconsin, if that threat is made in a domestic violence situation, the firearms can be removed. So we'd like to see that expanded to be any kind of threat, not just in a domestic violence situation, and we know that would save lives too.
You get your funding from where?
We have many, many individual donors all across the state, and then we have some foundation grants.
My name is Pardeep Kaleka. I am a survivor from the Sikh temple shooting that happened on Oak Creek. It happened in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, August 5th, 2012, about 6 years ago. One of the people who did lose their life that day was my father, temple president, Satwan Singh Kaleka. Following that, we worked with Not in Our Town to create a film that documents not only what happened that day, but the response to it. And been honored and to be able to show that film to audiences all over the United States, as far as like kind of a program to what do we do when bad things happen to us. We have a choice to either become cynical about it or to actually take some action, and we've been humbled to be able to get our community known to the broader community after August 5th. And work with Not in Our Town.
The audiences for the project, have they been mostly Sikhs, or have they been across the boards, or have there been all kinds of people? Or
yeah, the audience that we typically get are neighborhoods, interfaith, a mixture of people that are just concerned about generally the changing demographic of their neighborhood. One of the biggest things that we saw that was facing sort of the tension in the air was changing neighborhood, changing demographics. A lot of neighborhoods struggling, going from largely Christian towns to allowing in people of different faiths. I mean, Muslims, Hindus, and how do they navigate that change? So most of our audience has been not Sikhs. It's actually been the broader public who is struggling with who are Sikhs.
Have the question of refugees and stuff come up a lot?
Yeah, all kinds of.
Because right now we have the Syrian group that's coming over, and I know I talked to one of the social groups, Lutheran Social Services.
Yeah.
And they were saying that there was kind of a struggle with them, placing them and etc.
Yeah. So we have talked about the issue of refugees, immigrants, and that comes along with the film as far as what we're taking on. The film is about a white supremacist who kills 6 people because of what they represent to the American fabric, and we felt the need to respond to that and say, okay, this is who we are, and I think immigrants and refugees genuinely will take up that responsibility and show you who they are. And I don't know an immigrant or a refugee who is not value added to this country because of the appreciation that they feel for being given the opportunity to be in America.
Now, that the shooter at the temple, he was kind of a lone wolf, but he was tied into various hate groups or something like that?
No, the shooter at the temple was an affiliated white supremacist.
Oh, he was.
His name was Wade Michael Page. He was an ex-military, psych ops. He was discharged out of the military when he was caught drinking, and he joined the movement after he was just discharged out of the military. He was an affiliated white supremacist that belonged to one of the most violent white power gangs in the world.
Have you talked to any veterans groups as far as PTSD? Was this guy having problems with PTSD as far as you know?
As far as PTSD, to be diagnosed with PTSD, you have to go into a clinic. And so a lot of times the symptomology for PTSD is hypervigilance, dialectical thinking, that means black and white thinking, disassociation, a lot of the trauma-related symptoms. I think that the people, and he could be having those symptoms, but maybe he wasn't diagnosed. But I don't think that was his only thing. I don't think the military caused him to be, caused him to commit that act that day. I think it's a totality of a whole bunch of things that happened throughout his lifetime. And so whenever we have like multi-symptom problems like that, I think we need multi-symptom solutions. But yeah, he was a vet. He was discharged. I think a lot of his want to kill 6 immigrants or kill a bunch of immigrants that day was that he had genuinely had an unhealthy sense of masculinity. And this is something that I think a lot of boys growing up in America struggle with, is this unhealthy sense of being able to emotionally express yourself. And the two things that boys and men do is they either avoid or they get angry. And you got a whole spectrum of emotions that happen, from sadness to guilt to all kinds of things that can happen with that. But I think less than PTSD, it's about men and boys not being able to express themselves in genuine ways.
Do you know where he served? Did he serve in Iraq or anything like that, or don't you know that much about him?
I'm not sure where he served.
Okay. How's the temple been handling this stuff over the years now?
Yeah, so the temple.
It's now been a number of years, so.
Yeah, it's been about 6 years now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're going on with life.
Yeah.
For us, for 6, we call it Qurbani, we call it Shahidi, we call it sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew about 6 before August 5th, 2012, and we're the 5th largest religion in the world. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is like, we don't get to know people before something like this happens, but we understand that was the sacrifice of that day, and it really took us saying, you know what, we're not going to wait for people to come to us. We're just going to go out to people and let you know who we are. And we realize there's obviously there's segregation, but there's also self-segregation, meaning that like people keep to their own, whoever their own is. This country we have something called a possession narrative, meaning that like people say, this is my country, this is my religion, these are my people, this is my faith, and a lot of times all of that is just illusions. And that's what Sikhism was built upon, saying, you know what, we have to separate people from their illusions and bring them together and say, we are all one. And we took that as a sign that day to say, okay, you know what, you're going to come here and you're going to try to divide and conquer and separate and make people hate. But we're going to bring people together with the ultimate truth that we are all one.
I wanted to get back to your bit about having trouble with masculinity between men and boys and stuff like that, at least in this country anyway.
Yeah.
Sikhism is heavily based on the idea of peace.
Mhm.
You know, you guys grow up with all that.
Yeah.
How is it dealing with a country that has a rationale of gun ownership?
Yeah.
You know, how do you deal with that? Maybe not yourselves personally, but how do you deal with the rest of the culture like that?
Yeah.
Because that seems to be based around how you express yourself,
Yeah.
masculine-wise.
You know, for Sikhs were founded on the basis of peace. But as the years went, there was times that we would take up arms. And that was because of, at that time, you know, Hindu persecution, Muslim persecution, Afghan persecution, British persecution. And that persecution being like, you know, conflict, that Sikhs felt like they needed to take up arms. But, you know, it is written in the book that when you take up arms, if you pull out a knife out of your sleeve, you better put that back in with blood, because that should have been your last resort. And so taking up arms should not be a proactive thing to govern the world and to police the world, because you are trying to maintain the resources that you have. And it is very tough to come to a country that sometimes, like, children know how to shoot, like, they know the sound of gunfire at 2 or 3 and understand how, like, you know, a clip works and a gun works. It's just our fascination in this country with guns is incredibly morbid, and with that violence, with that this sense of like what a man is and what a man should represent, and it's advertised without us even knowing it, that it's like, here I am watching TV and I see this person, and if I'm a boy and I don't feel like I'm strong enough, powerful enough, and now I'm starting to compensate because I don't feel those things. Now I'm overly trying to be a man in a boy's body when I haven't even been taught the emotional skills on how to be a man. And so I think our culture of gun worship is just incredibly morbid, but incredibly perverted as well.
And you all have families, you all have kids. All those kids are exposed to video games and, and movies and things like that, and toys and stuff. The difference between fantasy and reality, most people seem to think everybody knows the difference, except someone who has some real emotional issues or mental problems. How do you kind of see that playing out? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, now I see it as, you know, I'm a grown up and I see it as a man, and I do have 4 kids. I have 3 boys. They definitely see things on TV, but as parents we can monitor what they see. My kids, for example, my kids do not stay on the iPad too long. They don't have video games. They want video games. They want the next latest and greatest shoot 'em up game. But that's what we can control and say, no, well, you know what, I'm not going to buy that for you. I know I have friends that I've grown up with, and as a therapist now, I can kind of see from a different lens on how people are doing things and how people are raising, especially boys, how we're raising boys and without that level of emotional intelligence. And I'll give you an example. I have a good friend that I grew up with, and we were having dinner, and he tells me that his boy is not doing so good in school and feels like he's not strong enough.
Oh, I get the feel. I'll take over. All right.
No worries. So I have a friend that I grew up with, and he has a son. Son's getting a little bit older, and telling his dad, like, you know what, I don't feel strong enough. I don't feel big enough, tall enough, and all these things. And whenever I hear that, something kind of goes off in my psyche of like, okay, you know what, that's shame speaking. Like that's his shame speaking. And instead of addressing that or talking about that and seeing what that's about, and maybe he did talk about it, but in his next breath, he tells me about how he loves to play first-person shooter games, and go to movies where you essentially have the white male hero and he's off in military battle, and he's going against the brown bad guy. And you know, he's looking at me, and he understands my history. He's my friend, and he's like, "Oh, was there anything wrong with that?" I said, "Well, for one, like a kid's psyche works in this mechanism, and now you're taking him to movies, and he is compensating for that sense of a lack of power, or that shame mechanism. He's shame mechanism coping by feeling stronger than he probably should at that moment. He should just wrestle with, I don't feel strong enough at that time, and I just need to be loved, rather than I need to feel powerful."
The difference between being a dad and husband and family man and all that kind of stuff, and being a therapist.
Yeah.
What sort of problems do you see out there among other folks in comparison to, you know, your own family or whatever, and how do you deal with things like that?
Yeah, great question. In a broad sense, the biggest problem that I see are people are separated. People are lonely. You know, there was a study that just came out the other day, pretty comprehensive study, 20,000 people, and a significant population, more than half, reported that they feel lonely. And there's a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. Because being alone is like, I just want seclusion and solitude, so I'm going to be alone. It's a choice. Feeling lonely, and most of these people who were feeling lonely had a partner or had friends. And so what that tells me is that even in the midst of communication and the way that the world is, we still feel lonely. A lot of people feel lonely. And the other problem is that we feel separated. We feel disconnected. Somebody tells me something like, you know, Pardeep, I'm sick. I am sick of feeling like myself. I will tell them, in that same sentence, you talked about the I and the self, right? You talked about two people in the same sentence, and saying, and I'm applauding that they got to the point that where they said, I'm sick of feeling like myself, because then maybe we can bring the I and the self back together, back whole. People think that they're separated from other people, and this is exactly what Wade Page, the shooter, thought too. He thought that he was separated from other people. He thought that he was different from other people, and a lot of times this is what we think. We're like, those people are not like me. The truth is that we're separated from ourselves, and when we're separated from self and the I, we're not one, so we can't be one with the next person. We can't be whole. We can't even connect. But we're trying to, but it's just like it's you know, sometimes we connect through our minds and say, okay, you know what, I can speak logic and I can make sense of this, but then you're not connecting with your heart. And some people are connecting with their heart and their feelings, but not connecting with their mind. And people are just, you know, just those two things. Like, people are separated, and a lot of people are genuinely lonely.
There's a lot of talk now about cell phone mania, and people seem to be relating to each other on cell phones, but not in person.
Yeah.
There's no scientific evidence that I can support to, you know, offer this to you, and you're probably not qualified to answer that anyway, but I was just looking for an opinion. Do you find, or do you think that the cell phone thing is, rather than bringing us together, is kind of separating us more? Or is it just that we're just getting lost in tangents and going off on side roads?
No, I think cell phone technology is separating us in a way. It's bringing us together, but in a very artificial sense. And so a lot of times we're thinking about relationships not from the genuine place that we used to think about them before, but from an artificial sense. And that, for us, as spiritually as human beings, that's not gratifying enough. It's gratifying in a little, you know, ways of like dealing with things and saying, okay, you know what, because I got 300 likes on this, I'm popular. But really knowing deep down inside, you're not really happy with that, because that's surface level stuff. You would be happier if you just went, or you went in a little bit deeper with that one like and with that one person, and have that meaningful relationship. I see people who have 3,000 Facebook friends, and they're some of the loneliest people in the world. And I see some people who have who are not even on social media, and they're some of the happiest people in the world. Now that basically tells you that we have overinvested in technology and artificial mechanism of happiness. Well, can I talk about my book?
Oh, I didn't know you had a book. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So I got a book. It's called The Gift of Our Wounds, and I co-wrote it with a person who started the same organization that the shooter belonged to. So he was a founding member of this organization, and following the shooting, I reached out to him to kind of understand why somebody would do something like this, and to understand what we can do about it. And that relationship from that time has turned into a genuine brotherhood, and it's chronicled in our new book called The Gift of Our Wounds, which talks about his life growing up here in Mequon, Wisconsin, getting into what they call the white supremacist movement and starting the same organization that the shooter belonged to, and how he got out and what he does now. And then it talks about my life as far as being a 6-year-old immigrant coming to a new country and trying to assimilate, only to be told by a white supremacist one day that, you know what, this American dream that you tried to achieve was not really meant for people like you. And how, moving forward, we're trying to combat that exact rhetoric to make sure that, like, you know what, this everything is meant for immigrants and Americans, and really just trying to bring people together. And that's really what our organization does, is that we go out to different communities, schools, and try to have people understand through service learning that they are more alike than they are different.
I want to wrap this up. Is there anything that you want to add to this? Anything that you can think of?
No, just, support our work. Go out and buy The Gift of Our Wounds by Pardeep Kaleka and Arnold Michaelis.
How long did they say he's got?
Not long.
How screwy is he? Well, is his will any good? I mean, legit question.
He's having difficulties.
How long has he been like that?
Long.
Well, do you think he needs treatment?
Yeah.
But why haven't you gotten him some?
He won't take any.
What the hell can he be thinking? He's a dying man, for Christ's sake.
I don't know what sort of phase your dad's going through, but it's not going to last. It can't.
You all are just sitting here waiting for me to die. You're all against me, you bunch of bloodsuckers.
What I wanted to do as far as the discussion goes is it's not really meant to be a discussion about the movie itself. It's meant to be about some of the issues that may be raised in it. Now, the film was basically about a pretty dysfunctional family, so we probably don't want to resort to murder and things like, some of the issues of dementia, dealing with the elderly in different aspects, and who takes care of things, and should a person be institutionalized, and so on and so forth. Those are the kinds of things that I wanted to throw around. So Diane has had experience with the elderly and all kinds of other folks, so take it away.
First, because you mentioned dementia, the first thing that came to mind was as a gentleman in the movie didn't even appear to be having dementia. He was just like kind of frustrated, looking out, what can I do, how to interact, and one of my major concerns with that issue is that if you look at medications, a lot of medications make people look like they have dementia, and they don't really have dementia at all. They have to you speak to some of the doctors, and you'll find out that they are aware of that, and that they have to change the, dosage of them. And sometimes people are given too much medication according to their weight and their height, in every medication, and of course, you know, you metabolize differently. So you're finding people being put in places and diagnosed improperly, and then when they may be put in a nursing home or something, they're put in another situation where you have an issue where the people who are working there are actually stealing things from those people, and they're not really being put in a good place where they can heal. And some of the people are very uncomfortable with having male nurses washing them. They don't want to have a male nurse wash them, or come in to see them later and say, oh, I'll see you a little while, and they go, oh no, you're not going to touch me, because it's very uncomfortable. There are a lot of their privacy issues are taken away from them, and as well as clothing and nice presents that family has brought them. And it's very disturbing, because there are families where you find what do I say, the family becomes more like vultures waiting for the person to die. Whether the person is aware of it or feels it, you know, you don't always know if that's really the issue, because let me put it to you this way. What I have experienced is many times when people are close to death, they become a lot more psychic and more sensitive to things around them and the feelings of others, but they're also picking up on other entities on other levels. And because of that, you know, there's a lot of vibrations showing. So you're finding people, like even on medications, are going to have issues if you're in a nursing home or whatever, by the same token, so that they're going to be, how do you say, more sensitive to issues, but the nurses aren't answering the call bells. 3 o'clock in the morning, they're sitting there yakking and talking. There are nursing homes that are not doing anything. There are other nursing homes that are right on top of stuff. You come in and you find there's urine smells all over the place, BM smells. People think they're putting their parents in a better place to be taken care of, and they're not. And it's really disturbing. Even places that are called rehab centers are sometimes nursing homes. But by the same token, you have other places where they're trying very hard to change it. They can keep the parents in their own home and having somebody come in and help them out. But then by the same token, these people have to go through a process of making sure they haven't had any issues beforehand, because some of those people are not trustworthy either, but some of them are extremely trustworthy. So it's very difficult for people that are older people nowadays than it had been in the past.
Well, we had that issue with the movie Enraptured that you were in as well. That talking about the daycare nurse, the person that comes in to the home, and this guy was experiencing all sorts of psychic visions and whatnot. And he saw this nurse as Virgin Mary and all that kind of thing. Remember? That's in Enraptured. You had that other movie.
I'm sorry, I'm suddenly hearing is impaired.
Oh, okay. I'm just mentioning the other film that we're doing in the series, and the other film that I produced is about this daycare nurse that comes into another man's home, and he's developing this sort of psychic reserve in his mind. And she was just mentioning that as people are getting older, they tend to be a little bit more receptive in those kinds of things. Right. Now, I happen to think of a friend of mine that has issues with, and I'm trying to think, she has to take pills for not a nervous disorder, but to calm herself, you know, to become
less sensitive?
Yeah, that would be one way to put it. Help her sleep better. It's not tranquilizer, but you know, help her sleep better, help her to stay calmer and not get so nervous and all that kind of stuff. And she said she had been taking pills along that line. I don't know what kind of medication, but she said she hadn't dreamed for years. And then when the medication went down, and actually she stopped because she's no longer needed it, all of a sudden she was able to dream again, and she felt that she was getting more sensitive to things like a psychic self, you know. And then she's not elderly; she's middle aged, but you know, medication can do that to you. It can knock you out.
Yeah. Good job.
You had mentioned to me before about your concerns with medication and nutrition. They sometimes kind of fight each other the way.
Yeah, they do, and sometimes I'm finding a lot of clients are very upset because their medications, they don't even dissolve. They come out solid. Nothing's happening, and a lot of people, a lot of doctors. The doctors, my belief is, should be working with the client, not just saying, "This is what you do. I'm God. I'm the boss. You have no ability or choice to say anything." And the issue is that, you know, like I've had doctors where I've been able to bring in another book and say, "Look, you know, this is not working for me. I'm small and I weigh so much pounds. This is like for a person could be for 6 foot tall and weigh big, and there's no, you know, the same pill goes for everybody. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way." And medications like vitamin B12, in working in the psychiatric field as well, there was one doctor there that found that he treated his clients with B12 and they were fine. It worked better than the drug issues. So you know, what were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
So there are some, how do I say, places where you can go to groups and become, what's the term I'm looking for? Go to a seminar and they're saying your kitchen is your medicine cabinet. There are certain foods that balance you out. Like for instance, the big thing right now is blood thinners. And some of the blood thinners like Coumadin are actually still used as rat poison. Well, you know, there are certain foods that actually have the same effect as aspirin, which one of the researchers I was supposed to do when I was in college for my professor is to find out what exactly does an aspirin do. That's the purpose of it. It makes your stomach bleed, okay? So people were dying from aspirin a day. Coumadin overdoes the bleeding internally. And then you can have orange, and it also makes your stomach bleed. There are certain foods that do that, including alcohol. That is why when your stomach is warm after you drink it, it is actually bleeding. So you know you don't want to overdose your Coumadin with something else, and the doctors are still playing around. They don't know. You go into, I took a gentleman to a place where the doctor was checking the Coumadin levels, and he says, it's terrible. They don't know what they're doing. He was bleeding from his ears and his nose. His blood was so thin because of the amount that they were giving him. It's really inappropriate. So it's frightening a lot of people when I go into places and see them, and they'll say, I think they're just killing us off. There's something really not right here. They're not taking good care of us. Or, you know, and it was not a nursing home. It's a place, an apartment building where they have to go to the doctor. They need to have more people that are advocates for the elderly, and they listen to what they're saying. They don't, you know, do harm to them. What are you going to say? Go ahead.
Could I add something to this?
Yeah, please.
All right. My observation, and I think it's valid because my next birthday I'll be 90 years old, and I have no aches or pains, and I do not take any medicines.
That's good.
And my viewpoint, after looking at many cases of older people who are living helpful, energetic lives without a lot of aches and pains, etc., there are some rules that they follow that, and they minimize their drugs that they take, minimize, and they maximize their exercise, including simple things like walking rapidly, and trying in every way to do that every day, walk some. And they look carefully at the foods. so that they do not eat junk foods, but they eat wholesome foods and fresh vegetables and fruits, etc. And a peace of mind. That's so important. So many people have worries and anxiety, and they take drugs for them. But if you can maybe practice meditation, or simply learn to control your thought processes so that you are at peace with yourself and the world, you will find your health is much better. The amount of drugs you have to take are fewer and fewer, and you'll live a longer time.
I would totally agree with that. You're right on top of everything. That's exactly true. What I'm seeing with other clients that I have had that are becoming more nutritious, eating healthier foods, less junk food, less greasy meats and stuff, they are feeling better. And actually even animals, a lot of people who have a little dog or a little cat, they have become actually their caregivers in some cases. I go to one client, and when I come in, today was a little late, the cat actually goes, like, and walks right in there, and like, okay, feed me now. And then they just kind of watch their mom, and they go, meow, like, come on, let's go take the shower now, it's time now. And that's important to the person as well, because that animal is so loving and so caring, and it's right there for you, and just kind of like, okay, come on, let's go. And the dog said, come on, take me for a walk. And that's your exercise, and your breathing, and your fresh air, and interaction that stimulates your mind a little bit once in a while, or whether it's reading a book or watching TV or just having somebody to talk to. But something that's not, you have all these things in some of these apartment buildings that they can do, and it's like there's nobody to communicate with that they have as a friend. I mean, it's like a high school. They want to find somebody to share with, whether it's a pet or what. And there isn't any reason they shouldn't. They shouldn't be closed away and put someplace. When I was younger, my second job was to work in a nursing home, and I thought, they were very, very, I thought it was the best nursing home there ever was, and I assumed they were all that way, and they weren't. And I was not very happy with that. But the unfortunate thing is that one gentleman came in, and this was at the time prior to, they had people always living at home with them, and the family would take care of them, and they were just starting to do nursing homes because some families didn't think they could do that anymore. There was one gentleman who came in, and he was from a foreign country, and he was speaking his old language, but once in a while he would speak broken English. And basically what he said was, you put me here to die, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to talk to anybody, I'm not going to eat anything, and I'm not going to drink anything. And that's exactly what he did, and he died.
Yeah.
That's very frightening.
Your mental state is very important.
It really is.
Yes.
It really is.
You live a lot longer, a lot healthier.
You're right. And people need to have something where they can get together, whether it's knitting or crocheting or watching movies or, having discussions.
Being with other people is important.
It really
is.
Your
fellow man.
It really is. And it's real important, too, to have transportation. And there are more people that have more transportation now than they used to be. With the wheelchairs and stuff, the electric chairs, they never had that before. But the problem is, too, is that I'm hearing from some of the other agencies is that once the county gets in, look out, you don't have your person. That shouldn't be that way. They should give them more perks to be able to interact, because they have so much to offer society, so much knowledge and background and stories and life.
And when you're talking about perks, chances are you're talking about in the county, which is a government,
right,
to do something. And you're talking about asking the taxpayers to foot the bill. That's always a trial.
There are some people that, oh God, and I hate to even go out there, But there are some agencies, like they'll come in like a hospice, okay, and they say, we're here to help you. And I have interviewed some people who have come in with, just had little booths and you talk to them. And I really get very angry because a long time, and I get really emotional about it, a long time ago, my uncle was very ill. And I was with him when he went across to the other side. And they were giving him morphine because he was in a lot of pain and it was not pleasant crossing for him. So because of the morphine that they gave him, when he was ready to go, he yelled for me, okay? And I came into the room and he was screaming and he was going, "Oh!" And it didn't make sense to me. And I said, "What is wrong? What's wrong?" He says, "I see all these ugly faces and monsters. They're trying to get me." And I says, "Okay, hold on to my hand as tight as you need to, and we'll talk, and I will protect you. You're here. You're okay." So my hand actually hurt. He squeezed it so tight, and he kept yelling. And I explained to him, because I'm sensitive, that my grandmother would come and she would smell roses and she will take him to the other side. That's what I mean, helping cross, okay? And then I smelled roses and I explained to him that she was there, and then he let his hand loose and he relaxed, and the disease that he had, you could see pop up and his body went down. It was really weird because it was always even, and then the disease popped up in his body. He just released himself and he left. And the house seemed to have like a fog in it, in that evening. And he came and he asked for the waters, which I said, "I don't drink water. I can't give you any." Well, that ran into some more spiritual things like the waters of life, which is your electromagnetic field. It wasn't strong enough because he had been given so many drugs. He had been depleted, his spirit, and he needed lots of prayers. And the good end is I learned the prayer, I kept praying for him, and he made it over, and I know that for sure. But the fact of the matter is there's so much we don't know because we are a lot more complicated than just the physical realm.
Two things I should have added before, when I was talking about living a long time with health.
Right.
And one is communicating with your fellow man.
Right.
That's very important. And the last, but the most important of all, is spiritual things, which you just touched on.
Right.
Which means that you believe there's a loving God that's going to greet us when we leave this mortal body. So, in the meantime, we're blessed that we're here, and we should make the most of it and of our powers that are given to us. And that's basically what I wanted to add to the discussion.
I would totally agree with that.
We should wrap this up. Are there any other questions or anything you want to add as far as
Probably when you turn off the camera, I'll be back.
Yeah.
I think people basically you're not any different when you're older. You really aren't. You need to be appreciated. And what I noticed in the film, which really scared me and made me upset, is like the Orientals, they respect their elderly. And we're not, and the gentleman, he just needed, sometimes people need to be alone. Sometimes I've been like that, where I just need to just sit in front of the water and just watch the waves and just meditate. That's what you were saying, a form of meditation, right? And that's important for you because you are communicating on another level with the higher being, with God. The spiritual level.
Well, in the film we see this scene where the older man is talking to this younger lady at the bar, and all of a sudden he sees himself as this guy about 30 years younger dancing away, because his spirit is still, that's what he sees himself as. He's still there, just that the body isn't quite up to it.
And you're right.
But the personality, that he's still there,
Exactly.
Just put on a few wrinkles.
And she made him feel younger and more vibrant and excited.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's one of the therapies some of them the people are doing. They're bringing young babies or young children to places where the elderly are to interact to help them feel better.
Don't forget dogs and cats.
Well, yeah, you're right.
They're doing that at the airport now as a
that's
way
good.
of calming people at the airport. They have dogs you can pet.
That's neat. And
So that's
Sure.
sort of new.
And birds are like that too. I've seen a gal who had a bird and she was fighting with her friend or her sister, and the bird was getting all upset and he
Squawking.
yeah, well, he tried to get in there and I said, you have to get down on the floor and then walk. So he went down and then he walked over there, went over by her and went up to her and went go and you know, it made her feel better, it made the bird feel better.
We didn't mention that before, but animals are wonderful companions
Oh, yeah.
and give us a great deal of love.
I agree. I don't think we really appreciate them because I think if you really pay attention and you listen to the birds, they're really there to help us. I mean, they just kind of guide us like, stop, don't go, you know, like kind of thing. They're amazing, the dogs, the cats, everything, the deer. You know, it kind of upsets me a little bit, more than a little bit. This deer came to the church next door to where I live, and the people didn't know what to do, so they shot it and killed it instead of capturing it and put it out in the wild. It's like there's something wrong with our society. We really have to work together and find a way of changing things and making people have the awareness, not just once in a while, but together, all of us. You know, and eating properly, that's really important, like you said. And there's so many fresh fruits and vegetables that grow wild in our backyard and we're killing them and we're not eating them and we could be helping us heal. What were you going to say? You were going to say something?
Well, you know, we have smartphones and radio communication. We cannot see the waves, we cannot hear them, but we have an instrument that changes them so we can see and hear them. And that's the same with our spiritual thing. It's an unknown, it can't be seen, but it's there. It's there, and our minds and our souls are able to communicate, even though we're not aware of it.
The next phase is a hypnotic suggestion in which the client is slowly regressed into a more subtle stage of consciousness, which is where we believe the past life memories reside, starting by imagining that you're surrounded by light.
I remember walking over bodies, being forced to walk over these bodies of some of these people I knew. My head seemed to be at a strange angle, made to look down upon my body. I must have still been alive or just about to leave my body.
I saw myself with the tribe being burned upside down, which was bad enough. If I had been dead, it would have been upsetting enough, but I was alive at the time.
I found myself going back to a very primitive existence. I lived in a tree with a few other people, but we looked more ape-like.
We're sitting here after showing the Past Life movie, and I'm here with Diane Bloor, and we were just kind of going over some notes as to what sort of impressions or ideas you got from it, and what do you think people might want to know that wasn't covered, or questions that were raised, or anything along those lines.
I really thought it was very good and very informative, but what I would emphasize is what one of the gals was emphasizing is that it's really important to pray or to cover you prior to these events, like searching out what your past life was, like if you're looking in a mirror or something else, due to the fact that one of my background is I have a master's in social work, but I have a bachelor's in psych, and I always refer to my psych background more than my master's background. And I had a professor who I was extremely impressed with, in class he was talking about people with multiple personalities, and I raised my hand and asked him, did he believe in, how do I say, possession, etc.? And the class was extremely quiet. He said nothing, and then he said yes. And then he brought in a number of cases. And in one of the cases, a person was going into the mirror and trying to do self-hypnosis thing, but of course this entity was not covering itself, and eventually became possessed and had committed a multitude of murders, okay? Mm. So these are like things that are confidential type of things, but also in my own personal experiences of meeting a young man who was doing the Ouija board, did not do any prayers or anything, and he did become possessed.
Also did it alone, which they weren't against.
Yeah, okay. And his facial features actually changed. Mm. So a number of us got together and did a certain type of a prayer to cover, bringing the light in to protect them against the darkness. Mm-hmm. And he physically started to change back, but of course the issue was that he wanted the power because he thought he was having more power by becoming more psychic and having more energy and being able to do more greater things. But the issue was that if he killed somebody, because I'd already had this class and I had this experience from this professor, he would be the one that would go to jail. The entity would just take off and find somebody else to possess. Mm-hmm. So the fact is, people do not realize how important this is, and the issue is a number of people when you speak to in the higher mucka of the religious, how do I say, areas of life, basically say that if you don't tell people they don't believe in it, they're not going to play with it, and they're not going to get possessed, they're not going to have bad things happen to them. So just ignore it, you know, and it's like saying the devil's not there. Well, the devil is there. You can't ignore him because then he can just kind of take over and do his own little thing. So you have to be aware there is a war still going on. You need to be able to protect yourself. You need to realize, yes, God is there. And you can reach God and you can actually become more in tune with God, but you need to be remembering to keep in the light. And the way to get to God is just, there's a little phrase in the Bible that will tell you exactly what to do, and you can do that. But
there's the first documentary I did, which was on witches in Wisconsin, etc. And one of the guys I had interviewed happened to be based in Chicago. He had, I think, a couple of degrees too in psychology and whatnot. And he said that one of the problems that he had seen was teenagers when they're getting together and being teenagers.
Being drunk, yeah, that's not a good thing.
You know, they get themselves a Ouija board and giggle, let's bring up some scary spooks. Mm-hmm. And of course they leave themselves wide open and bring up some scary spooks and they get scared. And you know, I mean, you get what you ask for. Exactly. So, you know, that's probably what they were saying in the film here was that's probably not the best way to go about doing things. That's why the Ouija board has gotten such a bad reputation, is because people play around with it.
Right, in the incorrect manner.
Yeah.
And I think the issue was too with how you go about it and where you go to gather your presence or trying to make contact. I wouldn't suggest going in a haunted house or a house with murderers have been in there, because you might drag off the entities you don't want.
Well, especially if you're looking for it. If you're looking to, so there's because I've been involved with the Milwaukee Paranormal Conference the last couple of years. You know, there's all these vendors and all these booths there, and they have all these, you know, visit a haunted house for $10, you know, right around Halloween time, and stuff like that. And okay, but how can you be sure that the ghosts are going to be there right at night? You know, do you have a contract with them, or you know? So I've always wondered about that. I mean, there may in fact be psychic energy buried in there. And that's one of the things we're going over with tomorrow at some of the programs I've got here tomorrow is that the universe basically vibrates, everything vibrates and everything connects with each other, and therefore they can absorb energy and they can absorb emotions and ideas and things like that.
Right.
Which is why you can go to a battlefield and you might be able to pick up on some of that energy, etc. But if you go and looking for it and just to get yourself scared or something like that, then you may end up freaking yourself out, even if it's just your own imagination, or whatever. But then also if you're turning it into a business and
well, then sometimes you might be more or something, and I'm not coming out today, I'm busy.
Yeah, so I've always wondered about these, yearly Halloween trips to haunted houses or haunted locales and something like that, and tour guides that, okay.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure that there's some real energy there, but it just seems kind of odd to plan a trip around it.
Because it's really unpredictable. I know it's unusual kind of a situation that I had as my girlfriend and I were, in Michigan, there's a big old cemetery on a hill. And then it's like, kids like to go up there, and because you have a drop off. So we were driving by, we had a Ouija board, and she showed me, what it was like, and then we went past it again another time. And while we were going past, it felt like some entity came in the back seat right by the Ouija board, and we both looked at each other like, did you feel that? So, yeah, creeped us. My mother burned the Ouija board. She got so scared. It's like, we don't burn the Ouija board. So, it was a very creepy, weird feeling.
Well, yeah, but the more you keep yourself in the light, the more that stuff doesn't bother you in the first place.
Right.
So anything else that you picked up on, or
let me see.
Any other ideas that kind of came to mind? Or?
Well, I do believe in reincarnation. I think that's very powerful, that we have many lives. And I have mixed feelings about how to determine what you were in your past life, because I think, how do I say, long time ago when I was dating my husband-to-be, we went to a seminar. It was based on the things of, how do I say, transpersonal information developed by the Rudolf Steiner Foundation, okay? And they had come to town, they had a motel, it was all set up, and they had glasses to see aura with, which kind of concerns me because they would think that would affect your ability to focus, because their theory is that your eye focuses in the opposite direction. And they were also talking about people's past life experiences at that particular time, and people were talking about it. Well, he's kind of like me. I don't believe it unless I see it. I research it to make sure this person's not pulling the wool over my eyes. And they told all the places that they had lived and everything. We actually went to find those places, and he was very adamant they did not exist. So, it's like, I'm sure there are parallel worlds or look-alike places that we go to once in a while to be examined and looked over, and go into our brain to see what we're up to, and maybe they futz around sometimes and they shouldn't, because there's some naughty people there that shouldn't be there. But do you see what I'm saying? So perhaps maybe that's where they had their past life, but it wasn't where we were on Earth. You see what I'm saying? So it gets confusing, because the theory is that every 2,000 years you're reborn on the Earth. So if somebody else has a different theory of a new life, another life, you go to another planet or a different place where they take you and they say, okay, let's check it out. Okay, you did your cycle. Okay, we're going to do another one. The cycle is shorter. Whereas, like, for instance, this gal who was talking about her past life, if it was World War I or World War II, she looked too young. It was not 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard the 2,000-year cycle for reincarnation. Because I heard it happens all the time, and it's somewhat self-willed. In other words, that you can sort of choose, or you can sort of choose to hang back and wait for another century or something.
That's probably not impossible. That's probably very true. I guess I'm basing it on old knowledge that I've had from a long time ago. At that point in time, it was a 2,000-year thing unless you were killed yourself. We have instant birth again, and sometimes people don't want to live very long, so they die. There are a lot of different theories.
Well, yeah.
It's very difficult to determine. I know I had been told about the theory of licking glass and covering, so I covered myself. And I'm a person that, I don't believe it unless I see it, so I thought, well, I'll just see and I'll try. And I was a little disappointed because, you see, I saw myself not looking human.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Yes, and I wasn't a female. I was like, oh, sure, yeah, like I'm going to believe that. Okay, I know that works now. Go to another. So the idea is yeah, something was going on, because I guarantee you I would not want to see something like what I saw in the mirror, meaning a male image or some...
Oh, look, it's Prince!
Right.
I didn't know I was that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, but I do not know where I got the image from for real. It's still kind of like insulting.
Do you have a lot of lucid dreaming, or do you get impressions during the day of memories or things that kind of out of the ordinary, let's say?
How would I say this? I think I wouldn't say I have lucid dreamings. When I sleep solid. But I've had some very unusual, what I would call visions, only because it's like I'm really there, and it's like it's really happening. And then later on, they have become evident that those things actually became in a theater, and I went to see them with my husband, and I say, I was there, and that really happened. But there's a word, I have to find out if that's the word that they use. Like, for instance, they had, what's that one? How do you say? There was one with, say, UFO, and I was in this UFO, and I wanted to see Jesus, okay? And didn't realize that there was a book with this in, but I'd seen the book when I was younger, and I forgot it was this guy, and he was pointing down at Jesus, So I wanted to go see this, and we went over there, and I was looking out the window. He said, "Get down, they'll see you." I said, "Who's going to see me? I'm so high up. Nobody's going to go see me." He says, "You don't understand." I said, "Look anyway." It's okay, and I wasn't supposed to look. I was told not to do that. And I said, "We need to bring him back. If the world would be better if we could bring him back in time." He says, "You don't understand. You can't do that. If you do that, things could be different, and that means that Hitler might win next time, or something else. You can't do that." So I wasn't real happy about that. And then Jesus also, in my dream, or my vision, said, he didn't say, he said he died because of, when is the word for in the Bible, it was rewritten during the Shakespearean time. So if you read Shakespeare, "For you I have died" means because of you. Okay? So he died because of their sins, not for their sins. Not just, do you see what I'm saying? So it's been misinterpreted a little bit.
Well,
in this vision?
The Bible, when it's been translated a number of different times, and through several languages, starting with Aramaic and going all the way through. So things can get changed all the way through.
Yeah, and in my vision, that's what it was. And when I went back and I found this book, and I just thought, there really was, this place really happened. This painting is on the top of a church somewhere in Czechoslovakia or something, or Hungary. And in this UFO, they show a picture. It was above the of Christ being there, and there's a little man in there looking down. And I thought, oh my God, no. No. And I had never seen the book before, so it was very strange. And I had also had one where my husband and I were in his van, and some aliens were driving it. That did not make sense at all. But we were levitated over to Egypt. And this was in the movie, kind of, but not the van or anything like that, the Egypt thing. They were just talking about some of the things that these people had told us in this dream. and they were talking about how they levitated the stones to make the pyramid. And during the dream, he said something about Rumtek, and I was like, oh, I gotta remember one of these words because I don't know that language. I gotta figure out what that word means. I gotta remember this, you know. And there was a different word. He said, beautiful language. I could never, you know, and English is kind of harsh language, so I only could remember it was Rumtek, and I kept thinking that means everything's secure. It must mean secure because you had it ready, you know, like you're saying, like this guy, everything is Rumtek or something like that, and because of course, again, it's not English. In the movie, it says Rumtek, a word close to that word, means levitation. And I thought, huh, that's interesting, you know. So yeah, once in a while we have unusual dreams, but not for a long time. Or visions, it's been a while. How about you?
Not for a while. Not for a while. Basically, since I started the film company, it's all on the film. It's all on the film. I've been consumed with business stuff, and that just pulls you right down. So coming out of college and all that kind of stuff, I was a much more higher plane, day by day.
Well, give me an example of one of the visions or dreams that you've had. That
I could feel things better. I'm not necessarily clairvoyant, which means eyesight, or clairaudient, which means hearing. Okay. Clairsentient means feeling, and I tend to feel things.
Energies?
Energies, yeah, stuff like that. And I was much better at that like 20 years ago than I am now. So, and that's because I've been so focused in building my business life that it's pretty earthbound these days. Right. So I haven't had too many great, but I used to be pretty good at lucid dreaming for a while.
Can you share one with us?
Oh, I had a number of when I had started doing the Unexplained, which is the third documentary I made, and it's the third one in that series of things that are all about UFOs. I remember my room is on the second floor.
Okay.
And I remember seeing some guy just walk up to the window from outside and look into my room. Ooh. And obviously he had to be really tall because I'm in the second floor, but it seemed like I was on the first floor. And he had these metal bars for eyes, like 2 bars on each side, looking in. And he was just kind of studying me and then walked away, but it was so very clear. It's like I'm talking to you.
Oh, like abduction kind of.
I don't know if it was abduction, but it was like studying.
That is unusual.
That's just one example.
One more, please.
I'm trying to remember. It was so complex. It had to do with being in a sort of futuristic society. And I don't know if I was on like an artificial moon, artificial satellite, but but it was a totally artificial environment, sort of like being on a gigantic spaceship, and everybody there was human, but it was like 500 years in the future or something like that. I remember that one. Because when I woke up, I was just so surprised to see myself here. Wait a minute! How did I get off that thing? So
that's funny.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I can identify with that. I remember having a dream and a conversation. Oh, again, one of those, like you're really there, and a conversation and trying to save my planet. Mm-hmm. And asked for his help, and he said, well, what can we do? I don't understand, what can we do? And I said, can you do this? He said, we can do that, we can do this, we can do that, we can do that. We shook hands, and he would help out. And then the other gentleman called somebody in, and quite a tall guy, took me to the cafeteria, and we were talking about all of these people are aliens, and we don't judge anyone, and we have all this different kind of food, and what would you like to eat? And I said, well, I didn't bring any money, so I can't, I don't want to. I'll buy you something. No, that's okay. Beautiful different array of foods in the cafeteria and the ship. And I got to the end of it, and the gal that worked behind the counter says, okay, so-and-so, here's your food. And it was a little pill. And I thought,
what about all of
it? Don't you eat? And he said, in this particular thing are all the fruits and vegetables and all the vitamins and everything you ever need to have. And this is what I eat for my. This is my meal.
Mm-hmm.
You can eat anything you want. Anybody can have whatever they. This is what I eat. And someday you'll be like
Graduate
this
to
too.
that. Yeah.
And I thought, so when I went, and this must have happened when I was rather. All I keep remembering is every time when I was younger, I would say, "Is that those pills?" When I saw a vitamin, and they go, "Not yet, not yet, not yet." So that was a very interesting dream. Who would think? You know?
Imagine being in a world where you're in a restaurant and they give you this little pill, and then they give you the bill.
Yeah. Wait a minute.